In 1794, the new federal government decided to manufacture its own weapons so the U.S. would not have to depend on foreign arms. The Springfield Armory was the primary center for manufacturing small arms for the U.S. military. The location for the Springfield Armory was chosen by President George Washington. He chose the area because Springfield is inland and the Connecticut River is not navigable by large ships down at the mouth. It was not possible for the British, with their superior navy, to attack Springfield or land troops and expect to get at Springfield. It was also on a hill, close to supplies, near a large manufacturing center, and it had water power. The Springfield Armory then became a center for invention and development. In 1777, the arsenal at Springfield was established to manufacture cartridges and gun carriages for the American Revolution. During the Revolution, the arsenal stored muskets, cannon, and other weapons. In 1794, the new federal government decided to manufacture its own muskets so that the United States would not be dependent on foreign arms. Production of weaponry at the Armory began in 1795, when 245 flintlock muskets were produced monthly by 40 workers.
The rifle is invented right around 1800. You could say, I mean, the Americans had used long rifles here prior to the Revolutionary War, and there's evidence that they used them at Bunker Hill. The rifle is originally used for hunting small game, and what it has is a twisted bore, right? A bore is bored out to it with a twist, so that you now would have to load your rifle ball by pressing that lead, which is soft, in. It took a long time to load. So on a battlefield, it wasn't that effective. In fact, the riflemen that we have in the Revolutionary War are they're great. They're great shots. They take out a lot of British officers, but George Washington doesn't like them because the rifle doesn't accept the bayonet. It's slow to load. They need to hide behind musketmen, with bayonets, during the height of some of the battles. Point is, the early rifles made over there, what we call rifles, are muskets. They're not rifled inside.
In 1819, Thomas Blanchard developed a special lathe for the consistent mass production of rifle stocks. Thomas Blanchard worked at Springfield Armory for 5 years. The lathe enabled an unskilled workman to quickly and easily turn out identical irregular shapes. The large drum turned 2 wheels, a friction wheel that followed the contours of the metal rifle pattern, and the cutting wheel that imitated the movements of the friction wheel to make an exact replica of the pattern in wood. In the 1840s, the old flintlock gave way to a percussion ignition system that increased the reliability and simplicity of long arms.
We're looking at a model that a kid made. The model that the kid made has got the 3 different parts that every long arm has. It has the lock, which is the firing mechanism, the stock, which is this wooden element, and the barrel. But by the Civil War, you have cap-locked weapons, which are, it's a little cap, and inside of it, it's made of brass. Inside of it is fulminated mercury, and you'll see those cap locks when you go over there. The cap lock, it has a little nipple. Instead of having the frizzen and the hammer with the flint that fits in it, you just put this little cap on the nipple. You don't have to put any powder in the pan. There's no need to do that anymore. Fulminated mercury right on the nipple. You pull the trigger, the hammer comes forward, and bang, that cap goes off, the gun goes. With the frizzen on the rifle, the old flintlock, if it was foggy, if it was snowing, if it was damp at all, I mean on a night like a fall night like tonight, you probably wouldn't be able to discharge your weapon, at least not until you cleaned your frizzen, because it's going to accumulate with dew and moisture on it. Any change in temperature. The new caps allow the weapon to be fired in almost any weather, so it's just a much bigger improvement over the flintlock.
In 1919, many designs were submitted for a new rifle, but none met the Army's rigid specifications. In 1924, John Garand offered a design that was approved for further testing. This was the famous M1, or Garand rifle. as it became known after the name of its inventor. The Army adopted the rifle in 1936, and production began the next year. Thus began what was to become the greatest production effort in the history of Springfield Armory. During the entire production history of the M1 rifle, Springfield Armory produced over 4.5 million of them.
The M1 Garand is the weapon that stands out to me as being the ultimate weapon produced. A 30 caliber, semi-automatic, a fail-safe. It doesn't jam up often. Very reliable weapon. Easy to take apart, take down, set back up. Pretty accurate. I mean, they sporterized them after the war. You know, you'd get them to go hunting in Vermont for deer, but they worked on Germans just as well.
The Armory brought many immigrants to the United States and the Springfield area. Irish, English, African American, and even Czech laborers came to work in the factories in western Massachusetts. Springfield has been home for many generations of workers, and without the Armory, we may not have the population of immigrants that we have today.
By 1800, 1810, we have high-paid skilled labor and relatively cheap land. And because we just don't have enough skilled labor for the way the country is going. So you now have demands put on the United States Army to produce weapons of quality. Where are they going to get the skilled labor? Well, one of the ways we got done, what we had to get done, was without skilled labor, and that was to accept machinery. Machinery that would do the work of skilled labor. And this is what, say, Thomas Blanchard, for one, when he started working here in the early 1820s as an inside contracted specialist. He brought in his own team, set up his own machines, was paid so much per stock, gun stock, actually hired relatively unskilled labor. Many of his workers were boys, say between the ages of 12 and 16.
The last small arm developed by the Armory was the M14. The M14 has evolved over the years into the present-day U.S. sniping rifle, the M21. By the time the U.S. was involved in the Vietnam conflict, Springfield Armory developed not only rifles, but machine guns for ground and air use, grenade launchers, and associated equipment. Many weapons were not manufactured at the Armory, but plans and specifications were drawn up for the use of private contractors who built them elsewhere.
The Armory disappeared, not by its own will. It was government fiat in 1968. But the workers felt that they had work worth doing. This is the thing that comes through continually, that they felt that not only were they compensated sufficiently for their work, but they were working at something fairly unique in a place very special to their own values. And it's just not the kind of thing you have anywhere else.
In 1968, in a controversial economy measure, the Defense Department closed the installation. For almost 2 centuries, the Springfield Armory, built on the hilltop overlooking the Connecticut River, had been an important place for the development and manufacture of arms for the American soldier. The facility evolved from a place where skilled craftsmen built, piece by piece, one musket at a time, into a center pioneering mass production techniques, and finally into an institute famous for its research and development. The site is now a museum run by the National Park Service as the Springfield Armory National Historic Site.